Okay, I have a crazy one. Chat. And I stole this from a video game. Let's read through this article real quick. Even though this article is old, the ideas are all 100%. Keep the current rules. The current rule right now is in overtime, the first team to score a touchdown wins. If the team who gets the coin flip, if they kick a field goal, they don't win. The other team has a chance to respond with their own field goal, but if that team also scores a touchdown, they win. So that's a current rule. Another rule is same rules, but sudden death begins after the first possession. So each team gets a possession, but then after that, sudden death rules. If all things are equal, this just pushes the current overtime rule one step forward, right? So both teams score a touchdown. Now the next team who scores wins. That doesn't really...
Just leave it as a tie.
That doesn't really work. Well, ties can't happen in the playoffs, you know? Go back to sudden death. So the original rule was first team to score wins. A golden goal. But this makes it even easier to score because now instead of having to go score a touchdown to win, you could just, as the article says, get the kickoff, go 40 yards, kick a field goal, you win. And 40 yards right now, with the average yards after catch, the average air yards being somewhere between 15 and 25 yards, this would be 2 plays and then a field goal kick. Another rule is play an entire overtime period, but the issue with an entire overtime period, risk of injury. It is true. The more time you play in any one game, potential injury risk, and especially at the end of a game, as you get fatigued, as your body takes on more load, physical load, the propensity for risk gets higher as you are more tired. A whole overtime period, a whole 15 minutes extra seems extreme, but it would also be technically the most fair thing. And at the end of it, similar to hockey rules, you'd probably just play another period, right? So some of the issues here, which the current NFL rules that have been tried or thought of being tried are all coin flip based, right? The research out there suggests that team that won the coin toss won nearly 60% of overtime games when you kick a field goal to win a game. Now it's down to apparently 52% with no rebuttal. It seems a little shallow. To have something that is even and also fair in terms of the eye test is what we're trying to look for. Coin flips seemingly dictate a lot of it in a lot of the different current or previously tried scenarios. So here's the overtime rules currently in NCAA D1 football. I don't know if this exists D2 down. Each team gets 1 possession starting from the opponent's 25-yard line. If the score is still tied after both possessions, so both teams score a touchdown, say, the process repeats, but the team that went first goes second and vice versa, so it's like a snake. After 2 overtime periods, no extra points are allowed, only 2-point conversions, so no more field goals. The issues with this, though, is because you're at the 25-yard line, you're already in kicking range, and it seems a little more like red zone drills, right? Like, are you really playing football? Like, there's no, like, mid-game of it. There's no trying to penetrate into your opponent's zone in order to have a chance at an offensive play into the end zone. You're already there, right? So this really is kind of like min-maxing in a way. Modified rules is, rather than starting at the 25-yard line, start at the 50-yard line. You're out of your typical kicker range, right? At the 50-yard line, a kick would be now 60 yards. Starting there makes a little more sense. Also, the ability of the NFL versus the ability of the college player. You should assume that there should be some sort of differential in ability to score touchdowns from further distances out, and it gives you a little more of that feel of the mid-game, right? That being able to penetrate into the opponent's zone, that's still required because not every team is going to be throwing Hail Marys into the end zone. However, this does bring up some other issues, like in the college overtime rules, you get 4, it's a first and goal. You get 4 attempts. So if you did that from the 50-yard line, it'd be like a 1st and 50, which seems kind of unreasonable. Okay, here's the Nate Silver tweak. The league should adopt college football rules. No, they're not fair either. The team that wins the coin, that wins the toss, can choose to play offense second, which gives them a decided advantage because they'll know whether they need to score a touchdown or just a field goal. This is what I was saying before. You gain more information if you go second. You know the baseline at that point. And so if you have something to go off of, then you are in what's called the improvement stage, right? We do this in machine learning, right? If you have a baseline model, then you don't need to create your own baseline. You are now improving from the original baseline. In each overtime, teams get one possession each from the opponent's 25-yard line. Touchdown or bust. No field goals, no safeties, no defensive touchdowns. So rather than you have to outscore your opponent, it's a binary. You either score a touchdown or you don't. In the first OT, there's no conversion attempts. In the subsequent overtimes, there's mandatory 2 points. So this is like min-maxing. This is actually min-maxing. You're min-maxing for touchdowns only. Whether you rush it in or you pass it in, you gotta throw touchdowns. How about min-maxing for drama? Well, college overtime is already min-maxed for drama, in my opinion. But min-maxing for fairness is something that's different, right? That's what we're trying to get to. So here's some nerdy rules. And one of these is actually was proposed last year. So let's get to the nerdy rules. The team that gets a lead of 4 more points first wins. Tennis rules, right? You need to be ahead by 2 in order to win, right? In theory, this is still 1 possession ahead, but it requires you to, at the very least, if you are only having 1 possession left, you need to go down and score a touchdown. In its simplicity, there still are like weird snafus, like time, right? Like what happens when the quarter ends? Is it just whoever's leading? Or do you still play infinitely until a team leads by 4? And this doesn't avoid that idea of like exhaustion. The cut and choose method. So rather than any functional changes, the loser of the coin toss will decide where the ball will be placed. We lost the coin toss. I want the ball at the 36-yard line. You could do that. And the winner of the coin toss would decide whether to start on offense or defense from that spot. So if they put you all the way in the back, like your own 1-yard line, you could choose to be defense. However, the closer you are to the midfield, more likely the other team's going to suggest to take the ball, right? How do you optimize where on the field to place the ball versus mitigating the risk of being put in a position where you have to defend where you chose, right? Field position auction. You start from 1-yard line, or you only have 1 yard to go to score, and the teams get to choose whether they want it or not. And at some point in time, as you start on your own territory, there's going to be a break-even point somewhere between the 10-yard line and the 30-yard line. Teams are going to say whether or not they want to take the risk of being on offense or defense. This proposal is also pretty cool because as it gets riskier, team captains and their coaches, if it gets to this point, say no. And so they're saying yes all the way to a number, and then they say no. I like this one. I think it's a cool mechanism because it brings in some weird-ass game theory shit. Because if you don't choose the bad deal, then you don't have agency. The last one they suggest is basically just do what baseball does, which is play a full period, just keep going until they can't. Which I don't think is a real, like, this is just like, let's try to take all the positives and lump them into one thing. We're the ringer. This doesn't work for me. I think start here, but rather than for every possession, like do like some sort of scoring situation, I think for every possession, you move the start back. Let's just say you start on the opponent's 20-yard line initially. Then the next iteration, you start on the 40-yard line. And then you start on your own 40-yard line. And you start on your own 20-yard line, right? You just keep moving it back. That way, you still have this, but more phases of the game start getting incorporated if you can't solve it within the first 1 or 2 iterations of this. Some version of football memento, where you start with the red zone and you end with where you would be on a kickoff, you know? So another way we could do this, right? If we want to maximize player safety, like kickoffs or shootouts in soccer makes sense because that's also the primary scoring, right? So in this case, the primary scoring function would be touchdowns, and that would be more like the Nate Silver proposal. Okay, I have a crazy one, chat. And I stole this from a video game. So let's just say this is the football field, okay? And it's a tie. Theoretically, because it's a tie, possessions are near equal. Team number one, say they scored here, like at the 1 yard line, and they scored in the 20-yard line, and they scored here. And let's just say they scored in all these different places. They scored 4 times. And let's say team 2 also scored a goal line touchdown. They had a few different touchdowns here, and they ended up having like a return for the kickoff. And let's also say that they kicked a field goal. For whatever reason, they got to overtime, and these were the amount of possessions scoring possessions each team had. The overtime is you repeat the touchdowns from the places you scored from. You get 4 chances. You have to score from here, you have to score from here, you have to score from here, and you have to score from here. You did it before, you gotta do it again. Say you remove the closest one to equal it. Now the other team also has the same thing. You gotta score from the same positions that you scored in before. Limited amount of possessions, guaranteed scoring opportunities because you scored from these positions previously. It's from a word game called Draw Battle, where at the end of the game, all the words that you guessed, you have a lightning round to guess all of them again. I think that, like, from a completely non-statistics point of view, I think that optimizes for fairness and drama. The thing that the audience thinks is most fair is situationally what has happened within that game. It doesn't matter about history. It doesn't matter about statistics long-term over time. But if you say the overtime rules are you start from where you scored plays and you get 4 chances from each of those spots, easy to explain.